Hello, this is Uchan Shin, and this is my presentation. And today I will introduce Chapter 5, the several main concepts of Chapter 5. So here, this is the main concept I will introduce. Some is like forecasting method, demand planning, time series forecasting, casual forecasting, and also the CPFR. And so next. So let's go first. What is demand planning? So demand planning is a supply chain management process of forecasting or predicting the demand for product to ensure they can be delivered and satisfy customer. It involves creating a demand plan based on a statistical forecast that takes into consideration. So many factors they can influence demand, such as inventory levels, marketing strategy, buying trends. The goal of demand planning is finding the balance between having enough production to meet customer needs without having a surplus. So how do demand planning improve the supply chain? Demand planning can improve the supply chain because business leaders can stay in front of market shift and make more proactive business decisions while being responsive to their customers' needs. If a product isn't available all the time for customers to purchase, the company will lose their customer and also their reputation. So for example, last year, Sony lost millions of dollars in missed revenue because of the inaccurate demand planning, while the PlayStation 5 was released. The reason of this kind of frustrating situation happened is because the manager put more emphasis on demand forecasting and failed to implement demand planning. So it leads us to think, what is the difference between demand planning and demand forecasting? Demand forecasting is the process of predicting demand based on historical data and pattern, while demand planning begins with forecasting, but then goes a step further and takes into consideration many other aspects that are important in order to get an accurate prediction, such as distribution, seasonality, where the inventory will be housed, where it will be sold. External factor will be like a global pandemic. And it just happened last year. So because of the COVID, the chips is not available to import it into the US, so it influenced the production of the motor vehicle. So for me, from my perspective, I feel like demand forecasting is 2D and demand planning is 3D. Add more factors in it so we can see more and we can have more accurate prediction. So then we were further to introduce the several forecasting methods. So here we can see the forecasting methods could be divided into the formal and informal. And in the formal, we also can divide it the quantitative and the qualitative. So here I will just introduce two main and general forecasting methods, which are casual forecasting and time series forecasting. So what is time series forecasting? Time series forecasting is the process of analyzing time series data using statistics and modeling to make predictions and inform strategic decision making. The goal of time series forecasting methods is to identify the pattern or autocorrelation in the historical data that is helpful to understand the demand and use this to estimate future demand under the assumption that past apply to the future. So here we can see the picture here. So the red one, the blue line is for the umbrella sales in year 1, and the red 2 is year 2, and green line is year 3. So here we can see the pattern here. Umbrella sales sold better during the May until the August. So we observe the pattern here, and that is the purpose for the time series forecasting. Next, so then the second will be the casual forecasting. What is the casual forecasting? Casual forecasting is a strategy that involves that attempt to predict or forecast future events in the marketplace. Based on the range of variables, they are likely to influence the future movement within that market. The idea behind this type of impact, those anticipated variable will have on consumer demand, the type of pricing that the market will be able to support in the future, and what those changes will mean for the future of the company. This type of forecasting is helpful to companies in several ways, including the development of sales and advertising for the upcoming period. So, in simple word, is like casual forecasting is focusing on the future event, and then it try to find the cause-effect relations between those data, among the data. So there are several elements that go into a casual forecasting. Typically, the process will begin with an assessment of the market, while it currently stands. This will include the current position of the company within the market. And from there is a need to identify both independent and dependent variables. They are likely to exert some influence on the direction of the market in the period of time. And not in period of time, like over a specified period of time. Once there is a reasonable projection of what will happen to the market, it is possible to apply those same variables and their cumulative effect to the business operation in field. One of the benefits of casual forecasting is the ability to prepare for what is most likely to occur in the future. So here we can see this picture is using the same data but using the two different forecasting methods. So we can see the time series forecasting method. It focuses on pattern based on time, and we can see the pattern here, the curve, and also where's the high peak. What happened will be what happened. Normally, the high peak will happen in what kind of time, and the right one is casual forecasting, and this picture shows the impact of sales touch points and campaign spend on sales. So the companies, how much company spend and how much sales company get. It shows a relationship here. So next, I will introduce the aggregate planning strategy. So what is aggregate planning strategy? Aggregate planning combines the information on what a business needs to operate, from sales forecast to production and inventory to customer service, and then determines whether there are periods of time when the company has excess capacity or not enough capacity. In other words, it is how management figure out how to operate at peak efficiency by adjusting capacity when demand rise and fall, or influencing demand so the company doesn't have to change capacity. So with this information, a business leader can make an adjustment using various strategies like seasonal hiring or promotion. And what is labor production? Labor production is a strategy that produces the same number of units equally. This is common in industry where demand is cyclical and production capability are limited or capped. Next is what is chase demand. Chase demand strategy is an uncertain demand strategy where the change made to the output level will depend on the change in the demand. In case of chase strategy, the main concern of the management is to respond to the changes in the demands. In this strategy, the output changes are carried out following the demand changes in order to save the inventories and maximize the profits. The demand change also occurred because of the factors which are beyond the control of management, such as inflation, rising prices, changes in the preference of the consumers, and changes in the trend. Using the chase demand strategy, the company can decide to concentrate on the immediate needs of the customers rather than concentrating on the desires of customers. So now here I'm going to introduce the CPFR. So we can see the picture here. There are three main stages. The first stage is planning. Second is forecasting. The third stage will be replenishment. So here we can see the every step. Here are the nine small steps, and in the planning and forecasting and replenishment. So for the planning, we normally use the business plan, category information, framework of events, seasonal events to do the planning, to do the planning. And the second one, we will use the data of like promotion plan, new product information, individual forecast, current inventory in transit, that kind of information to do the forecasting. And in the forecasting, we can see there are also some small steps in the forecasting, like create a sales forecast, identify exception, resolve the exception. Be more detailed will be identify exception for sales forecast, then resolve the exception, and create order forecast. Identify exception for order forecast, then resolve the exception. Basically, it just find the sales forecast and find the exception and resolve it. And the last one is the replenishment. So we use order data to do it. So the benefit for the CPFR will be improved responsiveness to consumer demand, and also it will do better to forecast accuracy with single share forecast. It will also improve relationship between trading partner and increase sales and inventory reduction. And the last one will be also important is cost reduction. So here is my presentation for the chapter 5, and thank you for listening.